Hi, and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the VIBE Daily Chat Group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
All right, we are back, day 26 of the Devoted series of our VIBEZ Daily podcast. So excited to be back again with my friends, my wife Victoria, with Shameeka and Dylan. So excited just to conclude this week's reading. And again, just encouraging to you guys, 26 days of reading done so far, which is awesome. Keep going, stay at it.
You got this.
Yeah, definitely. We left off with the Israelites in the wilderness, and they had been grumbling. We kind of hear them grumble a few times here about food, about water. And we get another kind of grumble here at chapter 17, which is where we pick up today. Any thoughts, observations here with kind of, again, another grumble, another complaint from the Israelites?
This one, I just like the insight that my study Bible we talked about earlier this week, that gave the word Rephidim, whatever this word means or says, but it means rest. And I think like one of the reasons why they started complaining is because like they had this expectation that when they got here they was gonna rest. And so due to obviously like being lost in the wilderness and fasting for 3 days and all those things, like prior to this chapter, like this was the place where they can finally just take a time, a load off, if you will, and they didn't have anything. And I think that was just something that stood out to me.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's so interesting just how it just feels like, man, here we go again. Like just how repetitive, how much this story just keeps repeating. It's the same grumble.
For sure.
It's the same complaint. We about to die. You know, we're going to die out here. And it's the same response. And so it's just interesting just how cyclical this relationship has become. And again, no judgment, because I can see a lot of my own relationship with God kind of reflecting that. But I just do think it's so interesting that it's just, you start reading it, it's like, I already know how this is going to go. Like, because we've kind of heard the same story time and time again.
Yeah. Also admire Moses stowing away and talking to God in the middle of the murmuring and the complaining. And just kind of just what stood out to me was like, regardless of noise from family or friends, opinions, whatever the case may be, like how am I willing and able to like, let me get some clarification. Let me talk to God about this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. We are seeing Joshua pop up on the scene, because at first I was like, hold on, where'd he come from? But we're seeing him being kind of like brought into this place now, and being emphasized, and even how like God gives the instruction to Moses for him to write on a scroll, write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, and make sure that Joshua hears it, right? Because I will completely blot out the name of the Amalek from under heaven. And just seeing again like them just really weaving Joshua into the story.
Yeah,
thus far.
I love that Joshua is like a warrior here. Like he gets sent to fight. And like, I'm like, oh, Joshua been about it. Like he was like, oh, we finna go fight them out. Oh, I bet. Like I'm gonna take the people up and we gonna go fight. And I just think that just shows his faith and his reverence. And then like you said, like that, I feel like even just this saying to recite it in my version, it says recite in the ears of Joshua. Like he could have said recite in the ears of anybody else, right? Like I just feel like this was God even like choosing Joshua. Like this is who I am choosing. Like because he could have said recite in the ears of her, because her was another person that was with Moses and Aaron on the mountain holding his arms up. But like we only see her mentioned in one other chapter, I believe, like chapter 24 or something. Like that we see him mentioned again. So we know he's in the inner circle, but it was Joshua that like is the one that we consistently see with Moses.
Yes.
Yeah. I also just wanted to call out, like, I think it's interesting, just like from a historical perspective. Most often when like nations went at war, like kings would go before the people, right? Like, and kings would kind of lead them into battle. But like Moses takes a position of like up in the hills, right? And it's ultimately because for the people of Israel, God was their king, right? Like, and so God is going before them. But I think that it's symbolized that Moses is like, I'm not your king. Like, I'm not going in front of you to kind of lead. Like, I got a specific role here, and my role is to, you know, to go before God and to pray and to give you, and like to invite him to go before you. Because like if he doesn't go before you, like you ain't got no king before you. Like that, he is your king. And so I think it's just this clear symbol that like as he steps back to say, yeah, God's gonna go before you. Like your king will actually lead you into battle rather than me. And so I thought that was just an interesting symbolism there.
Yeah.
That's good.
And to that point, I think my study Bible had mentioned that like the fact that Moses' hands get weary and have to like be held up, like it also wasn't like Moses could be like, it was my hands as I held it up that you guys won. But like, you know, he needed help, and it just showed the like humanity of him, like this you know, the limitations that Moses himself had, like because it was all God.
Yeah.
Anything else here in 17?
I think you might have pointed it out, Dylan, but just seeing in verse 15, Moses building an altar and calling it, "The Lord is my banner." Like we get to see just these different ways that God is reverenced, and even new names that are coming about as a result of his deliverance.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, verse 18, Moses is kind of, as we see, the people have come to grumble to him a lot, right? So they kind of keep coming to grumble to him, and it appears as if Moses is becoming to be overwhelmed. So Jethro comes, and who's his father-in-law, and kind of gives him some advice here that is extremely helpful for him. Anything that you guys saw in his visit with his father-in-law that you guys thought was interesting here in 18?
First of all, Jethro just popped up on the scene. Like, I don't know how many years it's been, but he's still alive. He's heard of. It's cool to see that he heard about what all God had done. So it goes to show that these stories and just this deliverance has spread to the point where his father-in-law even hears about it. But yeah, I do think it is interesting how Jethro is like, wait a minute. He comes on the scene and he's like, he's seeing this whole system that they have set up where the people go before Moses and you know, consult him with everything, with handling manners and stuff. He's like, wait, you gonna get burned out real quick. Like, let's establish some systems and stuff. And at first, I think I remember previously reading this text and feeling like, you know, kind of thinking something was up with Jethro. Like, what you trying to do, or why do you think that this is a bad thing? But I think ultimately, like, what he was using was wisdom, because again, if you have over 600,000 people, that was the last time we even heard a number. I'm sure they've multiplied since then. Like, he's having to, consult with and have these conversations with, like, that's a lot of people. You do need to delegate out.
Let's not forget he's a priest too, right? Like, I'm grateful that he's able to give him this sound advice and create systems for him to not do so much work. And I feel like this is the first time we see like order, organized order, as far as leadership and because we kind of talking about it off camera, but like, how does the word get from here to there, from one person to 600,000, right? I think his advice just helps simplify, if you will, Moses' task.
Yeah.
I like just how he rolled up with his Moses, his wife and sons. Like, oh, I'm sorry. Get your wife, get your kids. Like, you done left them here with me.
That's true.
At some point, Moses had sent them back.
That is true.
To Midian, and he's like, no. Like, you gonna take care of your wife and your children. I'm gonna bring them with me. Here you go.
And I feel like this is also applicable to today. Like, we can get so caught up in the ministry part of what we do, and then now there's this neglect with our first ministry.
Yeah. I mean, I think it probably actually speaks more to, as much as Moses obeyed God and heard what God said, there's probably just an element of fear that it wasn't gonna work out, right? Like that to send his wife and kids back, it's almost like if something happens to me, like I just know my family's taken care of.
That is true.
Like if Pharaoh takes me out, like in the midst of all this, I just don't want to subject them to. And they have, they're Midianites, they're not Israelites, right? Like his family, and so it's kind of like, at least I know, hey, they'll be watched over. She'll be with her father. My sons will live on, whatever the case may be. And so I think there was also a level of just kind of trying to have its affairs in order in case something happened.
Yeah.
In that. But yeah, I mean, I think this whole thing is definitely just a lesson in just, wisdom, right? In our elders and just some of what can be provided there. And so, I'm grateful for the Jethros, right, in the world that can just kind of come and give you that wisdom. Like I said, that's not even why he came. He came to bring the fam and just like observed what was going on. And was just like, brother, let me just pull you aside and give you some advice, right?
Yes.
And like, I just appreciate that. And, we need those kind of people in our lives that just can pull you aside and give you a quick word. That's just kind of like, what, you right, man. I appreciate that. You from the outside. So like, it's not Aaron who Aaron is also overwhelmed by all this stuff. And, Aaron's gonna be like, you don't get it, right? Like we get this and we don't know who it is. It's somebody from the outside that has just fresh eyes and insight and kind of give that instruction. I thought that's extremely valuable for us.
Yeah, he also, going back to like chapters before, like Jethro had experience in leadership too, right? Meeting Moses, like just his background. I think that's cool, knowing that.
I love his instructions on like what type of men to put over the people. Like it was all character based, right? It was like people who are trustworthy. First of all, who feared God. Men who feared God. They're trustworthy. Who hated a bribe. Like they had integrity, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that he placed over just reminds me of Titus 1. Yeah. Where like what we are used to establish elders, like, and it was all character traits. It wasn't how much you know, who's the best orators and all that. Like, it was like, let's look at their heart. Yeah. And then these are the men that we're going to choose and put them over the people.
Yeah. Because it's such a big responsibility and call. Like you're literally presenting shepherds over a flock. That stuff really matters. Yeah. Especially when leading them and knowing that still God's ultimate desire is that he would be known through the generations.
Yeah. Let's go back to heart posture, which is something we've talked about before. In that, and then I think also to your point, it's also like, it's interesting to me because, we've talked about heart posture and how God kind of looks at that and evaluates that. But I think this is also starts to kind of give us some insight that there's fruit from our heart, right? There's evidence of that.
Yeah.
And like, I think Jethro's trying to help him establish like, this is what it looks like when someone is God-fearing, right?
Yeah.
And trustworthy. Like,
That's
these
good.
are some of the fruit from those individuals who have that character. But anything else on 18? Okay. Cool. So 19 picks up about 3 months after they've left Egypt. So, you know, again, not assuming all of this is chronological, because that's not exactly how the Bible is written, but had all of that taken place, that all that took place in 3 months, if that were to be understood. But now they're heading to Sinai and chapter 19. And so Moses goes up to have an encounter with God in this mountain. But anything that you guys saw here in 19 before we get to 20, which ultimately gives us what Moses came away with from his encounter with God. Anything that you guys saw in chapter 19 you guys thought was interesting?
I think this is crazy that this is the fulfillment of one of the signs that God told him back in chapter 3 verse 12. He told him, like, and you will know that I am with you and I have done all these things when you guys worship me at Mount Sinai.
He did.
I think it's so crazy that this was such a sign that he said to look for, and it was like 3+ months later. Like it had to be after all these instances of obedience.
Yeah.
That now you get that final confirmation and sign. Like, yes, I told you this is how you know I'm with you. Now up to this point, you should know God's with you, but this was the sign he gave them.
Yeah. That's good. Which again, it's just God being very intentional about, like, I know time is going to pass and I know things are going to occur to where, you know, there could be some wavering that happens in your faith. And so I'm sure he was intentional about the time frame for that reason of, like, I'm going to keep having these reminders for you guys to know that I'm with you. Because we saw how quick it was for them after their worship session to go ahead and already forget. So,
man, shout out to Moses going up this mountain, bro. Like,
I can imagine he's old, right? By now.
He started out at 80.
Yeah. But not even just that, like, you got thunder warring, you got lightning flashing, you got all this stuff going on. Like, as unholy humans are, God has still tried to have communion with us.
Yeah.
And his presence scared the Israelites. Like, they were like, you go up there, Moses. We ain't going up there. Like, you know what I'm saying? Obviously, towards the end of this chapter, like, he's like, okay, I'll figure out a way to go down there to be with my people. But, like, just knowing, like, just the description of what was going on at that mountain just shows how crazy God's presence is. Like, it alone, you know what I mean? That it can be terrifying.
To the point of, like, wanting to be with us, I really thought that it was interesting, these first verses in, like, 4 through 6, where he's just like, you see what I done to the Egyptians. I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. He calls them his treasured possession among all peoples. And then I love he says in verse 6 that you're going to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And so he didn't say kingdom of kings, right? Because like he's like, I'm king. But like what he always has wanted for us is to, like we mentioned before, like to have this like priest prophet like relationship where like I'm king, I'm God, I speak to you, and you teach all the people how to live for me.
That vehicle.
Teach, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I love that he says that here, that like let's get this thing right. Like I'm always gonna be the king here, but you guys are the kingdom of priests, and like the priests. You just think of like these people who are so close to God, right? And like have this close communion. God speaks to them, and they're just so close. And like he's like, this is what I desire for you, is this closeness.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. Good. Yeah. That reminds me of, man, is it in 1 Peter or I don't know if it's 1st or 2nd Peter, where God talks about like, you're my chosen people, like a holy nation.
Yeah.
Like, man, it's just that sweet reminder.
Parallels.
Yeah, the parallels and being able to see that.
Yeah, but to that point, I think what I love too is God also just establishing his holiness. We see this even when Moses first encounters God at the burning bush, that like, you know, I don't think we read or said this, but like God says, you know, take off your shoes. Like, this is holy ground. Like, know who you are in the presence of. And like at this mountain, when God meets them at this mountain, he is clear. Like, all of you guys need to be purified and clean and consecrated, because I don't think you understand whose presence you were in. Like, I've done all these things for you, but if I'm gonna come meet you, I need you to also meet me halfway. Like, I need you to get yourself ready. And so he's really establishing his holiness, and it's hard for us to really like understand that in a lot of ways, I think, because, you know, Jesus ultimately washes us clean of our sin, like in a way that, you know, made a lot of these things kind of a moot point, right, for us. But I think there's still a takeaway in just the reverence and the honor of the holy God that we serve, right? That like, I don't necessarily have to go, you know, consecrate myself and do certain things to go before the King. Like, he is present with us here today. But like, do I still just give like consideration and reverence for like, I am before a holy God, like in the way that I posture myself in my minds, my thoughts, my whatever. Like, do I just kind of give that reverence in that same way? And I think that I thought it was so interesting how God really establishes, like, just don't like, we are not the same. I'm not like you. You are not like me. So if you're gonna be before me, like, I need you to kind of take some steps to realize whose presence you're in.
Can I say, because I forgot to mention this days ago, to your point about like him taking his shoes, telling him to take his shoes off. I've also seen that as an invitation. Like, shoes hold us from touching the ground. And like, if this ground is so holy, like, and I'm not holy, I would think I'm not holy to take my shoes off. Like, this is an invitation to closeness to my holiness. Like, I'm purifying you to the fullest degree. I'm inviting you to feel my holiness, type of thing.
Like that.
You know what I
mean?
Yeah.
Anything else as they prepare here at the bottom of the mountain that you guys thought was interesting?
Of course, these 3 days, right? On the third day, we pointed this out a few times, significance of the third day, but I love in verse 11, so the third day, the Lord will come down. And I was like, yes, because he did come. Jesus did come on the third day.
Indeed.
So I just keep on thinking of just different things like that. But I do love that they had to be like cleansed and purified. And once again, this teaching. But then I love that I think it's crazy how much he shows up as fire. Like, in this whole story of Exodus, like, he is continuously showing up in pillars of fire, bushes of fire, and now he descends on Mount Sinai in verse 18 on it in fire as well. And so with, like you said, with the thunder and the lightning and all that stuff, like, there's fire and there's smoke and there's all this stuff. And so you said, I think he's just showing his might.
Good. Well, yeah. So, I mean, this is, again, Moses kind of goes back and forth. He's communicating and telling people they can't come up and all these other things here. But then God gives him in chapter 20 what we come to know as the 10 Commandments. And it goes through those individually and what it is specifically. And then how the people reacted to it. So let's just kind of take chapter 20 as a whole. What you guys think was, you think it was anything particularly interesting just about chapter 20 and these commands that God gives?
Yeah, I love how he starts off with saying, like, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. And then how he continues on to talk about, like, giving the commandments of not having any other gods, or like making yourself any images made out of foreign, like, these different things. And I feel like God is kind of setting the tone, but also make sure that they don't bring anything that they saw in Egypt, like any practices, any like just these idols and stuff that they were used to kind of seeing, or at least being around, and like not bringing that also into this space. Like, leave those there. Like, those wasn't your gods to begin with, but don't make that become a practice or a custom here. And then we do know, because we have gone through Genesis, like how easy it was for people to be holding on to these idols. Even within this lineage, we had a few of the people, like what was it? Was it Joseph's dad or Rachel, or back in Genesis, where it was like they had household idols and stuff, and it's like, no,
like
we're not.
Laban and Rachel. And,
yes, like we're not doing that again. Like, he has up to this point continued to make sure that they know, like, I'm the only God. That's it. So, yeah, thought that was interesting.
I love how he grouped these commandments. It seems like the first 4 is like all in reference to God. Like, this is how you guys are to relate to me. And then like the 5th through like the 9th one is kind of like, this is how you relate to each other. And that last one is like, don't hurt your own heart by like coveting what other people have. Like, although it's not directly against other people, it's just like, this is against yourself. Like, if you start covering people, one, it's like, that's just the affliction towards yourself of discontentment. And so I love that how he sets it up. Like, this is how you guys are going to operate now. Like you were saying, Shameeka.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think, I love that to me, it's not surprising, right? Like, to this point, we have read generations worth of human history and encounters with God. And we can look at every one of these commands and go backwards and go, oh yeah, it was clear that Cain shouldn't have killed Abel, right? We can go back and go, oh, it was clear that they ought to have relaxed on the 7th day and rested on the 7th day, right? It was clear that God was jealous, right? And had issues with whether it's idols or places like Babel, when people were trying to come after, create towers towards him. Like, we can go look at all of these and go, oh, it's clear God did not like this, right? And so I think I love that even though they weren't written down on stone tablets as commands, it was still clear what God expected of his people. And so to get to this point, it wasn't like new news to all the Israelites. Like, oh wow, God didn't want us killing each other this whole time. That's crazy. Like,
that's why Moses looked around.
Right. That's why he was looking everywhere to figure out if somebody was watching him. Right. So like, it was clear that along the way, like, people, they knew right from wrong. Like, a lot of that was innate to them and their understanding. And so I just thought it was so interesting that you read these. And even not just from our perspective with hindsight, but just from what we've already read, it was clear that people of God, they understood, like, these things are not what we're supposed to do.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, what about the people's reaction? Like, what are you guys' thoughts on this? Because obviously we've heard a lot of, what did you say earlier this week, Shameeka, a lot of confession, not a lot of repentance, right? From the people. Yeah. But yeah, what do you think about kind of how they responded?
They focused on the wrong thing. All they were just talking about was the thunder and the loud blasting of the horn. No one's thinking about, like, we just got a word from God. You know what I'm saying? Like, the fear consumed them to the point where it was like, we don't even want to be up there with you. Go ahead, go crazy. You know, that's interesting.
The fact that they thought they were going to die, and God spoke to them. I'm like, well, he just saved you guys from dying. Like, he's saved you multiple times at this point from dying. But what I love, like, that Moses says is, like, don't fear. Like, God has come to test you so that you might fear him and that you might not sin. But instead, like, the people, they stood far off. Like, they retracted from him. But it says, while Moses drew near. Like, so, like, this reverence that God wanted caused Moses to draw near. But the people, they stood back, which is, like, the opposite of kind of like what he wanted their hearts to do.
Yeah, for sure. And still, like, it's like
disappointing.
It seems like they're just more comfortable with Moses being their representation of God than like them again just having this even deep, like, more closeness to the actual God. It's like, I mean, of course they were used to it. They were used to Moses being used by God in that way, but it was like they just could not get past it.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you kind of see the early stages of like priests and how they had to represent people of God, going to God in the Holy of Holies. In this situation, obviously it's out of fear, but I just thought it was cool.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, technically we have a few verses where we kind of start into some other laws at the end of 20. But I'm gonna kind of actually pause us here to wrap because again, as we've talked about and said before, the Bible was actually not written in chapters, and so although there's a break kind of at the end of chapter 20 in our Bibles, the way they're written and organized, the last few verses here of 20 really kind of go into a series of laws that God kind of establishes, and it makes more sense for us to discuss those together next week. So before we get into those last couple of verses, just make sure that there's nothing else, anything else on the 10 Commandments that you guys had or that response before we kind of wrap for the week.
I would say just for their history, with being in Egypt, like verse 3, you must not have any other God but me. First off, just reminding them where they came from, right? I am the Lord your God who rescued you from Egypt, the place of your slavery. Let's start with that, okay? And then you must not serve anyone else but me. I think just establishing, because there's so many idols that they had in Egypt, you know what I mean? Just creating that boundary immediately, and on top of that, knowing that is like one of the most important commandments of them all, right? So yeah, something I thought about.
Cool. All right. Look, we appreciate you guys joining us again this week. Just encourage you. We just said it here, the 10 Commandments, so Sabbath this weekend and all that stuff. Get your time off. But man, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on Monday. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us